Greetings and welcome to a crossover for the gardening and electronics friends on this channel. I'm going to attempt to kind of do this so it's not too much gardening or too much electronics, but what I want to talk about is my Garden of Light effort. I tried to do this a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, where I was living at the time, there wasn't enough light to do Garden of Light because I'm using solar garden lights to do this, and in order for it to really work, you got to have enough light to charge the batteries in the garden lights so that they'll come on and stay on for more than half an hour at night. It's really kind of pointless to go through all the effort if everything just shuts itself down after a half hour. If you want to have a display that looks nice, you got to have, a few hours at least. So anyway, just to give you a taste of what I'm working on here, you're looking at my latest design, which unfortunately most people just couldn't figure out what I was trying to do. Can you figure it out? Can you see what this is? I'll pause for a second, and you can pause if you want to stare at it and guess. Okay, that should be long enough. What I was attempting to do is an angel. And this is like, I set it up according to my design, and it just didn't look right, and everybody thought it was a Christmas tree. I tried to redesign it slightly, didn't quite work. Then I tried redesigning again, still didn't work. So at this point, I'm going to pull this particular installation and do something different. But here's another design I took a picture of a few nights back before I changed it over to the Angel. And you can see it's a 5-pointed star. At least I hope you can. The problem here is ultimately that I've only got 30 total lights. I've got a few more, but they're oddball designs. They don't really fit into this that neatly. There's also, you can see, if you look carefully, that there's a few of them actually missing. The heads are missing. It's because I'm still chasing down battery issues and or other things. So at some point in this series, I'll probably do a diagnostic thing where you can see how I diagnose what the problem is, and maybe another episode, I haven't decided yet, on literally what I'm doing to test for battery capacity, because some of these lights require more power than others, and so I'll put the batteries with more capacity into those and batteries with less capacity into the ones that don't require so much power. So it's just a question of kind of matching things up. But that's kind of where I am on that stuff. I'll just talk about how I made these designs and in general, how I make the lights. The designs you basically have to think of as like points on a grid. So if you literally took a piece of graph paper, you could then just color in individual cells, and if each one of those cells was, let's say, represented 1 foot apart, then you could actually lay out a grid and put the lights in the grid the same as you have on a design on paper, and then hopefully you get what you're looking to get. There are other tricks that you can use. I've used string lines to pull a straight line. Maybe it doesn't exactly fit the grid perfectly, but with a string line, say if you take one of the ones near the top there and you pull a string, you put a little loop in the string, you put it around the post, the stake, and then you pull the string tight going to another corner, then you can equally space out the lights between those. Hopefully that makes some sense. But there are various techniques that you can use to try and accomplish this. So that's kind of how I do my designs. The reason I'm shooting this in a still motion kind of thing right now is because ultimately I'm going to change this out, and so I'll try and give you a taste of what that looks like. As I design it, I'll do a time lapse, or as I lay it out, I'll do a time lapse. But the simplest thing that you can do, if you really wanted, is you could lay out the lights along a pathway. So let me go ahead and show you what that looks like. Okay, so that may be an extreme example. Those are only a foot apart. I did pull out the measuring tape to try and make sure I got them evenly spaced. The last few I didn't even bother. Ultimately, I'm going to tear this all back down, but it just kind of gives you an idea. I probably, in a case like this, would, instead of being a foot apart, would have gone with 2 or maybe 3 feet apart. It really depends on how many you've got. I did step off the yard and tried to figure out, okay, I can do that first leg and the second leg. The third leg I knew I wasn't going to have enough for, but if I spaced them out a little bit more than they are, maybe even go to 1.5 feet, I probably could have gotten all the way across the top there. Just kind of gives you an idea of what's possible if you've got a bunch of them. Okay, so now let's try for something a little bit more advanced, and for that I've gone freehand. What I wanted to show you is, in a good design you have kind of a center point or some key element, and I've got this light here sitting right against the wall, and let me give you a quick view of what it looks like from the street, because ultimately I'm designing these things so they can be seen by people walking and driving by. And so there's that light, and there's the lawn, and there's what I just did. And so ultimately what I want to do is I want to start from this point, and I want to get a 90-degree angle from here. You don't absolutely have to do this, but you really you need to have some degree of foundation to your design in order to execute it. So I'm going to pull a line from here up that direction, and I'm going to put another stake up there, a spare stake that I happen to have, and I'm going to pull a string line between them. And that will establish the top of my design. Okay, I've already placed a stake, but before I get too far into this, I need to consider something. There's this wall here, and our lawn is slightly sloped towards the street, but what I want to consider is people walking up or cars driving by. So I got to make sure that I'm actually far enough, the bottom of my design has to be far enough from the wall that you can actually see it. And in the past I've been using about 4 feet. Maybe I'm going to go about 6 feet from the wall at this point, and then I have to consider the overall height of my design. So it's going to be 6 plus whatever that number is to get to that second stake before I even bother to pull a string line. Okay, now that I've figured it out, I had the idea in my head, I've got it all laid out, but I needed to figure out the measurements. So I'm going to have 6 feet from this light here, and the overall design is going to be 13 feet. It's in 2 parts. The top part is 7 feet tall and the bottom part is 6 feet tall. So it's going to be 13 plus the 6 feet, which is just the arbitrary number away from the wall to make sure that people can see it. So we're at 19 feet total. So I need to make that stake up there 19 feet away from this one. The other thing to consider is that if you're going to have a display that people are going to come by and take a picture of, you're going to make sure that it'll actually fit in frame. So what you need to consider is the top and the bottom of your design and whether or not you can fit that within frame. If people come stand at the wall here to take a picture, I want them to be able to fit it in frame. I'm using my own phone as a reference, the camera on my phone as a reference. Hopefully everybody else is reasonably similar. The other thing to consider is that as I shoot this video, it's actually zoomed in slightly. This phone zooms in slightly for video versus taking a photo. So I could use the video as a reference because that's smaller, and that would then make it possible for more people to take a picture of your display. So let's pull a line at 19 feet and at a right angle to this wall. For that I'm going to use what's called a square. It's actually a construction square. It's about a 3 foot by 2 foot square. You could use other methods if you wanted to pull a straight line, or you could just do it visually. Once you get your initial line laid out, then you can use a tape measure to get most of the rest of your dimensions. Okay, so I've actually set 3 stakes here. The most important is the one at 19 feet, but I also set one at 6 feet and another one at 12 feet, which if you think about it, 19 minus 12 is the first 7, and 12 minus 6 is the other 6 for the bottom of my design. That gets me a good set of reference points to make sure that as I draw this out with string lines, it'll actually match up to what I was intending. If I do something wrong, the extra posts that I put in there will actually tell me that I'm going in the wrong direction. So the next thing I need to do is I need to pull a 7-foot string line at 3.5 feet away from that sort of middle post that you see there, the one that's at 12 feet from the wall. That's because of the way I figured out the layout. So basically it's going to be 7 feet wide and 7 feet tall. I need to cut that in half for the left to right. So it's going to be 3.5 feet from on either side of that post. So I can set a couple of other posts. I can actually now start using the lights that I put up along the pathway, and let's just get that going. Okay, remember what I said about setting the stake so I can kind of make sure that I haven't made a mistake with my calculations? Those of you that are engineers or mathematicians will realize that on the slope of a right triangle, it's not going to be 7 feet. That was my mistake. And in fact, if you look at my string line, I've got, I guess what you could call flags. They're basically just some painter's tape that I put there. That one is at 7 feet, and there's the post. So it's actually more than 7 feet, but that's okay. Ultimately, this design calls for what amounts to a 7-foot triangle. Let me back up a little so you can see all the posts involved here. 7-foot triangle, 7 feet wide, 7 feet tall, does not make for a isosceles triangle. I'm trying to remember the actual terminology here. Again, mathematicians are probably yelling at me or agreeing. Anywho, the plan is I'm going to put lights up along this leg, and then I'll pull the string line that way and put lights up along that leg. I have to remember how many lights, but let's just go ahead and put them up. Okay, so I've pulled the second line. I'm putting in the lights. They're about every 13 inches, which kind of makes up for that difference. So it'll still be 7 feet tall, 7 feet wide. It's just that the legs are a little bit more than 7 feet. Okay, so now I've finished the top part, and I'm double checking that if somebody came and stood up next to the wall here, that they'd actually be able to get the whole thing in frame, and it looks like it will work. Let me back out into the street carefully without pulling off the curb, representing a car going by. They'd be able to see it. Maybe they stop and come take a look. Well, we'll see. But I got to do this next part. So I've pulled a line between the next two posts. These will not be staying where they are. Ultimately, they're just there. So that line in between helps me measure to the left and the right of it to complete that part of the design. Okay, so the first two are literally 6 inches apart. I used the tape measure as sort of its own string line against the outer from the top there and the post I put in the middle, which should be at the same 7-foot level. So these two are just in between the two corner points there and 6 inches apart. Okay, that, my friends, is the finished product. You kind of go up a little bit, like most people will probably have to do, and hopefully it's a little bit more obvious what I was aiming for. But if not, I'm going to go ahead and shoot pictures the next few nights and post them at the end of the video here so you can see what I'm doing. Meanwhile, I need to actually go back, and if you look carefully, you can see some of them are kind of leaning over a little bit, so I just need to tweak them a little bit. And I need to figure out what was wrong with the 3 that I had, you can see, that don't have a cap on them. I need to figure out what's wrong and get those up and running before I put it all out tonight. So that's it for now. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the lights themselves. I will say that if you look on eBay, you can look for solar garden lights or solar path lights. If you can go to the dollar store, you can get them for $1 a pop. Most dollar stores will have them. Maybe different design from what you see here. Some of them have the silver stake and the silver top. There's all sorts of different designs that are available, but in general, if you can get the dollar store ones, that's about your cheapest option. eBay, I think I saw like a 12-pack for 15 bucks, free shipping. So if you look around, it might be a little bit more than $1 a piece. If you're going to get 30 of them like I have, you're looking at 30 bucks right there. It depends on how your budget is. Or you could just get a few at a time. Just like I could put them around the wall here. That could have been a nice little decoration, but I decided I wanted to do actual designs. So that's kind of where we are on this. Like I said, next episode we'll talk about the actual lights and how they're constructed and start looking at what you can do to modify them. Then I think the episode after that will actually do the modifications so you can see what that actually looks like. That, depending on, you might be able to get color ones on eBay. Might be a little bit more expensive, but if you've got some tools and know-how with soldering and you can order up some parts, then you might be able to modify them yourself. It all depends on your level of DIY kind of capability. So anyway, I'll wrap it up here. That's it for now. See you next episode.